Hello and welcome to week 3. First of all, I want to apologize if I start coughing. I still have the whole lung infection of some type going on that I haven't been able to figure out yet. There it is. I also want to apologize for the template not working. I don't know why. It just does not want to be available for you guys. It happened in the other classroom as well. I should say the other course. So if you still don't have that template, I'm not going to hold it against you on week 2. If you're unable to open it / didn't save a copy of it, go ahead and shoot me an email and I can send that off to you because it is important that you have it. Every course should have a template. Just update it a little bit if you have an old one. We were encouraged to update ours to include the running header on the second page. This week's theme is school culture, climate, framework, and model. You're going to discuss the trauma-sensitive school framework and how it's best implemented. You can articulate an understanding of paradigms and the importance of shifting them in the design of a trauma-sensitive school. You're going to identify and describe the essential elements of a trauma-sensitive school. To do that, you are going to be looking at 3 chapters from our textbook, and there is an additional article to look at as well. Quick graphic on how school culture and school climate are intertwined, the ideas that go into it, and how those ideas help build onto retention, SEL, and improved learning outcomes, which are really our goals. This is how we get there. A couple of paradigms to discuss. The prison or school to prison pipeline. It's the idea that students of color face harsher discipline, are more likely to be pushed out of school than white students. 40% of students expelled from U.S. schools each year are Black. 70% of students involved in school arrests or referred to law enforcement are Black or Latino. Black students are 3.5 times more likely to be suspended than whites. And Black and Latino students are twice as likely to not graduate high school as whites. Lastly, 68% of all males in state and federal prison do not have a high school diploma. This last number is not accurate for Minnesota. I haven't looked this year yet, but I want to say we're closer to 30% in Minnesota. Yeah, 30% seems about right. We might even be lower right now as generally we see that number spike when there aren't a lot of jobs around. So if the economy isn't doing great and people are getting fired, generally in prison we see a spike in the number of, or the percentage of males without diplomas, as they are having a harder time finding jobs and therefore go back to kind of that life of crime. Some other things to note: that 59% of students disciplined 11 or more times did not graduate. That's just during the study period. I will post these slides, so if you want to look at the links in this one, you can go to it. Students who are suspended or expelled are twice as likely to repeat that grade. And in contrast, only 5% of students with no disciplinary involvement were held back. So what these numbers tell us is that it is very unlikely for a student to be held back because they aren't doing well unless they are also being a discipline problem. This really speaks to both kind of that idea of social promotion, where almost everybody moves forward, and the idea that maybe we're holding them back for reasons other than their academic performance. Or the other reasons are kind of a byproduct of their academic performance. Or vice versa, I guess. Paradigm shifts. A couple of great quotes here from Bruce Perry. Science gathers knowledge faster than society gathers wisdoms. And many policy recommendations are made with good intentions, but with minimal understanding of the developmental needs of children. One of the ideas that immediately comes to mind for me here is high stakes testing. And while we have to make sure that our schools are teaching things rigorously and having students advance, without really that understanding of what that does to children and what that teaches children is the most important. Another one is resilience is not an innate quality, but a potential that requires healthy relationships. It cannot flourish in relational and emotional starvation. Therefore, caregiving and parenting quality really matters for the child's well-being. That's also, again, by Dr. Bruce Perry. And for me, this one kind of speaks to the idea that parents are highly important in the education system, and that without parental involvement, it is very, very, very difficult for a student to be highly successful in our current system. All right, from Mr. Alexander this week, the essentials of trauma-informed schools. 4 of them: to help students feel safe, to help them be connected, get regulated, and learn, which I think are things that we can all agree we want in our classrooms. This week in week 3, as I mentioned, there are 3 chapters and 1 article. There are also videos in the discussion boards. So if you open up the discussion board, you should be able to see there is videos in, I believe, both of them. Nope, just the first one. So just those 2 videos right here. That being said, at least one of them is quite long. It's 25 minutes of that one and 10 minutes of the other video. So make sure you set aside time for that. I will try to not take up, 2 hours of your time with this video. So your first prompt, this is where those 2 videos are. Children are learning machines, absorbing knowledge and skills from an early age. We help young children deal with feelings and make friends, but then we stop. Social emotional learning equips teens for a lifetime of success in a complex world. So please review this 25-minute Twin Cities public television documentary of 3 schools in Minnesota as they establish an alternative learning environment that propels student success for a lifetime. And then watch the interview with Dr. Bruce Perry. The required part of that begins at minute marker 56, goes to the end. So you do not need to watch the whole thing. That's important. You can if you want to, but really you need to start at the 56-minute mark and go on from there. So here are the questions. In what ways are paradigms helpful? In what ways are they a detriment to education systems for students? What paradigm shifts did the 3 schools recognize as critical to student success? How do you determine whether or not you have the correct view or lens when working with your students? What is the importance of shifting paradigms in the design of trauma-informed schools? And what paradigm does Dr. Bruce Perry suggest we reevaluate? What is your response to his perception? Dr. Perry also recognizes educators. Your response? And remember to dialogue with at least 2 colleagues. And just a quick reminder, you are more than welcome to disagree. We're not going to agree with every reading we do, and sometimes they're just put there to challenge us. I know I've had some people message me in past cohorts that they don't necessarily agree with somebody in one of the videos, and that is just fine. That is part of being a scholar, is finding sources that you don't agree with and being able to articulate why you don't agree. Discussion board 2. Select one of the essentials noted, one of these 4 right here, and expound on the key components to promote student success. What paradigms may currently exist that require a trauma-informed school, which includes teachers, administration, staff, community, to shift, and how would you as a leader ensure that change is a benefit for all students? Reminder to use scholarly sources to support your response. Looking ahead to the end of week 4, we'll have assignment number 2, which is a case study of a trauma-informed school. So what you're going to do for this one is find a school in North America that self-reports as a trauma-informed school, and you're going to conduct research on the school via the internet. which should include the school's website. So one of the examples here, St. Paul City School, I have now seen covered many times. So if you're able to find other ones, I would prefer that, as I've read about St. Paul City School many a time now. But if you absolutely cannot find any, Walla Walla, Washington, and St. Paul Public Schools are some examples. You are going to talk about the characteristics of the trauma-informed school. You're going to describe the school that you're looking at. Then you're going to analyze if the school that reports itself to be trauma-informed really is, based on their alignment with the desired characteristics, both from our textbook and from what they report on their website. Make sure to include references. All right, my personal discussion stuff. So a couple of you asked about navigating trauma in prison or my classroom management style, etc. And I figured I would give you a couple minutes on that. So navigating trauma in prison, the specific question was how to deal with, how I deal with the guys who are very power adverse, who see big problems with authority. And the biggest thing that I have done is to utilize humor and kind of just that one-on-one personal approach. So me pulling out the I'm the teacher and I'm telling you to do this card happens very, 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 very rarely. It is much more common that it's, we just do this so I don't have to write a report, and just like kind of feeding into that idea that you're a human being, I'm a human being. If you do this, I have to do this, which is more work for me. Can we not do that? And that seems to generally work with most of them. They get that I'm not trying to be hard on them. I'm doing my job. I want them to learn and move on. And now for classroom management, I actually made myself a little chart because I was trying to think of a good way to summarize my classroom management style in prison, and there's not one, because it very much depends on the makeup of the class. And as I was thinking about it more, I realized there's really kind of three main components of the makeup of the class that I could point to. The first is the age, the average age. So I would consider the young group to be 30 and under, 18 to 30, middle 30 to 60, and then old 60 and up. And this is just kind of based on some general motivation and behavior trends of those groups that I've seen. And then the next thing would be kind of response to authority, with that either being defiant or compliant. And lastly, their attitude towards learning, with it either being they're very actively engaged, or I couldn't find a better word than lazy, just really choosing not to do anything. And frankly, the best classes to manage, the easiest ones, are going to be that middle age group, because they tend to be the most compliant, and often many of them are also the most active in their learning, because they've come around to, if I do this now, I still have time for it to pay off for me. With that being said, those are the groups that I get off topic the most with. They're the ones that I'm going to have discussions. We're going to joke around a lot. We're going to talk about current events or politics or just like things going on in the prison. So those are the classes where I actually build somewhat of a community with, and I still have the same expectations for what they're going to get done, but we're having more fun in class. We're joking around. We're definitely talking on a more personal level. Now, the hardest group for me personally to deal with is that young, defiant, and I'll probably add in lazy there, just not really wanting to do the work. So not only am I not wanting to do the work, but I'm going to be loud and disruptive about it. That's where I end up having to pull out more of the, this is your job. I'm the teacher. I'm saying you have to do it. If you don't do it, you need to leave so everybody else can. So with that group, I tend to be way more strict. The rules are the rules. We're not working our way around them. I'm still going to try to be personal when I can, but the rules are the rules. Now, the other end, the guys over 60 are way more complex because they are usually one of the two extremes. They are either extremely defiant or extremely compliant. But that does not necessarily correlate with whether they are active or lazy. So I can have a completely compliant guy that is going to be doing the absolute bare minimum of what I ask him to do. Or I can have a super defiant guy who is very actively engaged in learning, but just doesn't want to follow any directions. So they're going to be actively learning things from other classes, bringing their work from other classes, or they're going to be skipping ahead, ignoring my lesson, that kind of thing. So it's really hard to be like, no, you need to pay attention, because they are actively trying to learn something that they need to learn. Whereas on the other end, it's really hard to motivate those guys who are following all of my directions, but don't really want to learn it. They're just, doing the work because they were told to, not because they want to learn it. And with that group, this is going to sound weird because it's not something I would do with students, but I tend to lean on some of the peer pressure from the other guys. If I have an older gentleman who is compliant and actively engaged, those are the guys that I will sit next to the ones who are being lazy or defiant, and I will actively stay out of their conversations to try to, most times it works, sometimes it backfires, but let the guy who's doing the right things discuss with the other guy why he's doing those things. And a lot of times the discussions are around, getting a job that doesn't send me back to prison, or I want to know this stuff so that when my kids ask me, I don't feel dumb. And I probably muddied the water a lot with that conversation. If you want to ask me more follow-up questions, please do. It's not going to be super relevant to what you're doing in K-12 because, like I said, I do a lot of things in prison that I absolutely would not do with children or even in an adult setting outside of prison. In your discussion boards, you guys talked a lot about combative or aggressive students. But you did a really, 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 really good job looking deeper at what was, if you knew, or may have been going on with those students. So excellent job there. Great discussions. The most common ones I saw were, if you miss class, you're forced to miss more class. And this is the most common programmatic things that you would like to see change. Sorry. I also saw a couple where effectively the synopsis could be, just because it isn't traumatic or problematic for you, the decision maker, doesn't mean it isn't re-traumatizing or problematic for others, i.e., the students in the classes that don't fit with your socioeconomic status. One of the ones that I was actually the most surprised is still happening is taking away recess, because that's when they're able to run off that excess energy. So I feel like taking that away is doing way more harm than good. Also saw a couple people talking about timed tests, which I find particularly interesting as we, in prison, we do have we use the TABE, which is the Test of Adult Basic Education. That gives us kind of a grade level. And then the GED, and those are both time tests. But everything we do in class is completely on-timed. And so it is an interesting, what does school start to look like when you take away the timer? And it's very interesting. We can discuss that more if people want to. My prompt for you guys this week is, the most common policy that people wanted to change was exclusionary discipline. So suspensions, kicking students out of class, sending them to the principal's office, taking away recess, that kind of stuff. So what is one thing that you in your classroom will change or have already changed or implemented to try to prevent kids from being sent out of your classroom? Doesn't have to be, a novel. It can be short. Say, for example, in my classroom, I don't have one yet because I'm not in a classroom right now. I will think on it and I will respond to this prompt as well. I look forward to reading all of your guys' assignments. I haven't gotten a chance to start that yet. I am hoping to have all of the rubrics and scores back to you guys by this Wednesday, the 20th. Have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.